Hi. So in this video, I'm going to be reading from a blog post of mine, and I'll put the link to the blog post in the video description in case you want to see this in a text format. Okay. In this post, I'll seek to offer a possible explanation of God's justice in dealing with people who never hear about Jesus before they die. I'll also look at God's justice and those who never heard of God's Old Testament covenant with the Jews. In addition, I'll think about how God may have dealt with people from before the Mosaic covenant. Starting with the Christian covenant, I present this quote from Professor William Lane Craig's article, How Can God Be the Only Way? How Can Christ Be the Only Way to God? And in my blog post, which is linked in the video description, there's a link to his article. So you can see that if you want. But his quote says, God in his providence has so arranged the world that those who would respond to the gospel if they heard it, do hear it. The sovereign God has so ordered human history that as the gospel spreads out from first century Palestine, he places people in its path who would believe it if they heard it. Once the gospel reaches a people, God providentially places there persons who he knew would respond to it if they heard it. In his love and mercy, God ensures that no one who would believe the gospel if he heard it is born at a time and place in history where he fails to hear it. Those who do not respond to God's general revelation in nature and conscience and never hear the gospel would not respond to it if they did hear it. Hence, no one is lost because of historical or geographical accident. Anyone who wants or even would want to be saved will be saved. Close quote. So what about the Old Covenant? Here I think Acts 17:22 through 31 is instructive. Then Paul stood in the midst of the Areopagus and said, Men of Athens, I perceive that in all things you are very religious. For as I was passing through and considering the objects of your worship, I even found an altar with this inscription, To the unknown God. Therefore, the one whom you worship without knowing, him I proclaim to you. God, who made the world and everything in it, since he is Lord of heaven and earth, does not dwell in temples made with hands, nor is he worshipped with men's hands as though he needed anything, since he gives to all life, breath, and all things. And he has made from one blood every nation of men to dwell on all the face of the earth, and has determined their pre-appointed times and the boundaries of their dwellings, so that they should seek the Lord in the hope that they might grope for him and find him, though he is not far from each one of us. For in him we live and move and have our being, as also some of your own poets have said, for we also are his offspring. Therefore, since we are the offspring of God, we ought not to think that the divine nature is like gold or silver or stone, something shaped by art and man's devising. Truly, these times of ignorance God overlooked, but now commands all men everywhere to repent, because he has appointed a day on which he will judge the world in righteousness by the man whom he has ordained. He has given assurance of this to all men by raising him from the dead. Paul says these times of ignorance God overlooked, but now commends all men everywhere to repent. I take this to mean God judged Gentiles not by the covenant with Israel, but by the knowledge of God they had through nature and conscience, as Paul teaches in Romans 2:14 and 15. For when Gentiles who do not have the law, by nature do the things in the law, these, although not having the law, are a law to themselves, who show the work of the law written in their hearts, their conscience also bearing witness, and between themselves their thoughts accusing or else excusing them. So God, knowing the hearts, had a standard by which he judged Gentiles. Finally, what about people who lived before the Mosaic covenant? I believe God dealt with those Gentiles, since the whole world was Gentile at that time, in the same way he dealt with Gentiles during the Mosaic covenant. In this way, I believe God would be shown to be perfectly just in his dealings with humanity regarding the issue of salvation. Thanks so much for watching. Take care.